Hey Neppers, it's me, Wild Neptune, and today, for Epic 7, we're going to talk about Remnant Violet. But before that, I would appreciate if you like, comment, and subscribe. Consider following me at Twitch, at twitch.tv/WildNeptune. We play a few games over there, have a good time. With that being said, let's get into it. But this is mostly for players who did not get this totally busted unit right here, and are wondering if they should take their quote-unquote consolation prize in Remnant Violet. And I'm here to answer that question. So you see here, he's grayed out for me, so that means I don't have him. As a disclaimer, this will be based on my experience fighting him, how it's being used against me, how the other players use him, and what I think is the best way to use him, stuff like that. I do think I have a pretty good grasp on his place right now. So, Remnant Violet is a pretty old hero right now, so most people should know his kit, but just in case you need a refresher, here we go. His S2 is his bread and butter, so at the start of the battle, he'll gain an evasion buff, 50% bonus evasion. He will get a focus every time he dodges an attack, and when he's at 5 focus, he uses his S3 automatically after an attack. It doesn't matter if this attack hits him or not, he will always use it, and it works like a trigger, so like SSBs, so even if he's hit at 5 focus by a Landry S3 or a Spectre S1, as long as he's not dead, he will still counterattack with his S3. And his S3 is a huge nuke. He gets an attack buff before he attacks, and it will penetrate defense by 50%. His S1 will gain more focus, it has a blind chance, and just does some single target damage. So his kit, all single target, big nuke, has evasion. Now, I do want to address some of the notions that Remnant Violet is not a good hero. I see a lot of cries for him being buffed because Green Violet is better. Well, I understand where some of these complaints are coming from. I do want to address them. So, first of all, you don't buff a unit just because another unit is better than said unit. Like, just because Emma Lilius is the best unit in the game right now, and I think everybody agrees to that point, you don't buff every other unit to be as good as she is. It doesn't quite work that way. But one of the main things I think is that a lot of players still think of Remnant Violet being used the same way as he was when he first came out. He came out like over a year ago, I think. That's a long time ago. The meta has shifted drastically. The units that are being used has changed a lot. The way that RTA, like the mechanics of it, have even changed since then. Back then, he was used on a lifesteal immunity, lifesteal crit type build for more sustain, because that was the best build back then for him. That is how he did his most effective work. Now, there are still players who have playstyles where that build is probably better for them, right? And they know who they are. In general, though, most players should be running Remnant Violet on speed/penetration. This is because he's gone from having like a core part of his build being sustain and his evasion to his evasion being a bonus versus something you build around. So instead of building around this buff here, now you build around his S3. Doing massive damage really quickly to a key unit, getting rid of it right away, boom, done, right? That's how it's been used. Fast unit, nuke, kill Ruel, kill May Chloe, kill Rimuru, right? Stuff like that. That's what he do. A lot of drafts only have like one night, and he banned that night out, and that's it, right? He is obviously really, really strong if you get, like, first pick. Because getting first pick allows you to pick up, like, ML Lilius, something like that. Pre-ban AOL, who are 2 units that do really good against him. And then you can, like, pick him in like, your 4-5 slot if you see your opponent only has, like, 1 mitigation or 0 mitigation. He is really, really strong against teams where you can get rid of your opponent's lone mitigation or get rid of, like, his lone counter that they might have, like an AOL, ML Lilius, something like that. So that is, like, the first thing I would say. It's that a lot of players are just stuck in the past in their thinking on how he's being used right now. The other thing, too, is gearing. And I don't mean gearing like lifesteal or like a set, right? I mean just having, like, good enough gear to use him. This is a weird case where if your gear is good enough to use him, you probably know already that he's at least decent. And if your gear is, like, bad or, like, not good enough to use him effectively, even if I told you he's decent, you would think I was lying, because when you do use him, he's probably bad for you. Another also is that, yes, he is not the best hero in the game, by any shot. There are a lot of other ML 5 stars or, like, limited heroes, stuff like that, that are better, more versatile than he is. So even though he does have a place where, again, being used against low mitigation comps is a force ban, is a nuke, just to do a ton of massive damage overall, one of the strongest single target attacks in the entire game. There are better units that have more use cases that are just, again, better overall. And he does have a lot of checks and counters in the game. So let's get into those also. So obviously, one of his biggest counters is going to be Conqueror Lilius. And this is because she can get rid of the evasion buff. She can push him back a little bit so that the DPS can hit him before he gets it back. Attack down, stuff like that, provoke. Just overall really strong against him. Maybe even stronger against him is AOL, where AOL will, of course, unbuffable, silence, strip the buff off, right? Archdemon's Shadow, she will seal off the passive a lot of the times. Also, because the Fairy Tale artifact got buffed, the bonus damage from the extra hit will eat away at its HP really quickly, especially because the nuke builds are pretty frail overall, of course. So there is also that factor. And you know, again, a ton of other things too. Bellion strips, Rimuru. If he doesn't kill the Rimuru, well, he just stole the evasion buff, right, for the enemy team. Things like Bryceria, who's being used more often now, will just kick the buff off also, and her S1 does bonus damage regardless of if it hit or not. Ran will strip the buff, right? So there are a lot of meta units, like really strong units, that just either check or counter him. Thankfully, you don't always see all these units in a single draft. Even though they're all strong, sometimes you might see 2 of them, right, in the draft, 3 of them even. But for those times you only see 1 of these units in the draft, well, Remnant Violet might be a decent pickup, right? And again, of course, there are the units that are just really, really strong overall. Like, we're talking about Apoc Ravi, you know, units like Meteor Caloric, LQC, again, Conqueror Lilius, like Maid, Ruel, Spectre, Fallen Cecilia. Like, overall good, solid, plug-and-play type units that work in a ton of different drafts as more proactive type picks versus as a, what I would say is a counter pick, like Remnant Violet. So finally, to answer the question, should you pull on Remnant Violet if you are relatively close to pity. This is actually going to depend more on your roster, probably more than anything. So, if you're a player who you already have Conquered Lilius, right? Like, let's say you got it from a Moonlight Summon somehow, or a Covenant, right? You already have, like, a Ravi, and, like, you know, a couple of those other units that I mentioned before that's overall really, really strong. Remnant Violet, as long as you can gear him up, like, relatively well, will probably be a nice supplementary piece to your PvP roster. However, let's say you don't have any of those units, right? Then Remnant Violet is probably not going to be as well suited for you. He is a unit that is really strong, but in certain situations, and is somewhat reliant on having a deeper roster overall. And I'm not even saying that if you don't have, like, the super powerful units, that Remnant Violet is going to be bad for you. Because he is probably strong enough where he will probably win you more games against opponents versus, like, if you're using maybe, like, a Green U Fiend, right? However, the cost to do that is just too high to use the Mystic Pity on. So in that case, for those players, like, wondering if, hey, like, I'm not quite sure, you can always just wait the 2 weeks to see what the next Moonlight 5 is going to be, right? So that's what I would say. If you already have a pretty strong roster overall with a powerful units, you know, using the pity on Emerald Violet is not the worst thing in the world. I still would recommend most players, though, wait to see what's coming in a couple of weeks. If they're at pity, right? If you're, like, really far away from pity, just go ahead and pull a few times, right? You know, you're not losing that much by doing it. So that's the video. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope it was informative, and you have a better knowledge on if you should pull or not. Anyway, I'm Wild Neptune. It's been a good one. Nep out.